Often when I make these sort of videos, I read out from a news report. But to be quite honest, the script is obvious now. It's like a screenplay. It's like it's like you're a professional actor and you know what's going to read. That's how it feels with Just Stop Oil and Insulate Britain and those other vile groups. Um, Now, I wasn't sure whether to make this video because I thought, well, is this repetitive? Is it just things I've said before? But quite honestly, I had thought 2023 things would have changed a little bit. It seemed for a while the eco groups had sort of quietened down a little bit. At the start of the year, Extinction Rebellion said they were going to change tactics, but Just Stop Oil made no such promise, and that's obvious. One of the latest stunts in London, like I say, I'm not going to read out a report this time. Well, actually, let me see if I can get some basic information. But like I said, it's just predictable. It's just, I feel if I feel sometimes when you, yeah, here we go. I want to have the flexibility to talk about this without having to just recite the report. But anyway, that's what I'm referring to. Daily Mail, May the 24th. You can see there the man in the grey. Now, he is not one of them. The guy in the grey is a builder who was detained, arrested. Well, actually not arrested. He was put in handcuffs, but apparently not formally arrested. Now, Scotland Yard Deputy Assistant Commissioner Lawrence Taylor, this is by George Odling, I should say. Deputy Assistant Commissioner Lawrence Taylor said his behaviour was unacceptable and insisted that officers responded proportionately. This is talking about the builder who took matters into his own hands. They detained the man in handcuffs to prevent further breach of the peace. They took his details, will review evidence and interview the male who was not arrested with a view to further police action as necessary. With further police action. So this guy now has this legal case hanging over him. For what? Because he was trying to get to work. And understandably, he lost his temper, and I don't think he punched anyone. He dragged their banners away. Um, it's a sick, perverse situation that the public are being forced into this situation. It's infuriating. Mr. Taylor insisted that he completely understood the frustration caused by protesters walking slowly in the roads and why motorists wonder why they are not simply arrested. Police have legal obligations connected with a response to protests, and we must police peaceful protests in a proportionate manner, he added. Any interventions must be necessary in discharge of a policing power and balance the rights of the protesters against the rights of the wider public. There have been 30 arrests of climate activists in London since April 24th, but it is unclear how many were made yesterday. Um, the strategy of causing road delays by slow marching, that's really its nasty tactic, could be outlawed in the coming months, with proposals tabled for debate in the House of Lords on June the 13th, though no date is set for consideration in the Commons. And Home Secretary Suella Braverman has vowed to stop selfish, disruptive protesters from wreaking havoc in people's lives. You know, when people question the public order bill, this is precisely why it was brought in. This is precisely why it was drafted, because the public are wholly fed up with them. Now, they actually had the extreme arrogance, sharing footage of the altercation on Twitter. The Just Stop Oil account said, "This is an impossible situation. Do we disrupt ordinary people like this man arrested for lashing out today, or just sit back and watch everything burn?" They're calling themselves ordinary people. They're not. They're not ordinary people. They might come from relatively normal middle class backgrounds and ordinary professions. They're teachers, they're doctors, they're, in that sense, they're ordinary people. But I really genuinely believe that there is something quite sinister about Just Stop Oil. All of these groups, but I think Just Stop Oil is probably the worst of them. Well, they're tied with Insulate Britain, but I honestly think there's something quite dangerous about them, quite cult-like. I mean, what is the definition of madness? To keep trying and trying and trying something, even though it's failing, yet to keep trying and expecting different results. Now, with these groups, they keep doing the same thing, they keep pissing off the public, and somehow they are expecting different results. They say they've got no choice. Of course they've got a choice. They could do a lot of things. They could support sustainable green businesses. They could come up with innovative ideas of their own. They could they could be lobbying actually the big oil companies that they're so against. But we actually also need to challenge their actual narrative. I mean, their tactics are disgusting, and I think there should be much harsher penalties against them. I don't think they're peaceful. I think that when you are specifically, deliberately hurting the public, that's not peaceful. And people will say, their apologists will say, well, all protest causes some disruption. But I maintain, I insist that there is a difference between a one-off protest. Let's say, for example, the protests against the Iraq War. Um, now that probably caused disruption. The purpose wasn't disruption. The purpose was to express anger and discontent against the Blair government's decision to invade Iraq. That was the purpose of it. Okay, and they were huge protests. And unlike these eco extremists, they were massive. I mean, the biggest one had about 1 million people. And even if that is hyperbole, certainly there were hundreds of thousands involved. So it was much, much, much bigger. None of these protests have got more than, I reckon, the biggest, perhaps some of those in central London, maybe a few dozen. I don't think any of them have surpassed 100 activists. Well, now what does that tell you? In a country of 68 million people, none of their protests have got more than 100 activists. Even their online support is minimal. So it's quite clear that they've got basically no public mandate, none. And they don't care. They just don't care. But why I think they're dangerous is because they have made it very clear that they're not stopping. They've made it clear that they're going to keep doing this. It's been 4 years. I'm including Extinction Rebellion because they're all interrelated. 4 years, 2019 to now, and they're not stopping. In another incident, some of them went into the Chelsea flower show and put orange powder over the one of the floral displays. Now that is someone's time and effort, someone who's made that floral display, and these thugs come in and ruin it. I think they need to be called thugs. We need to stop normalising them as protesters. I think they're normalised as protesters. It's a bit like calling the paparazzi photographers. They're not protesters. They're professional activists. They're professional criminal activists. Um, and to be quite honest, I have nothing but contempt for them. And it's interesting, I'm not even personally affected. I don't drive. I've never been directly involved in any of these situations. But I just have a lot of sympathy for those who are. And I think it's sad that, this builder, this ordinary man trying to make a living, ends up in police handcuffs and now with legal case hanging over them. Police can say that, oh, their hands are tied. No, no, I don't really accept that. Yes, they have to work within the confines of whatever guidelines they're given. But they can make a decision here. They can say, well, what is the public perception? Are we going to hound this guy? Are we going to put a legal case over his head, keep him in limbo? Or do we maybe understand that it was a very human reaction to an impossible situation? He needs to get to work. He needs to make his livelihood, pay the bills. So is he meant to just sit back while these extremists, these fanatics, these sociopaths, they deliberately stop people getting to work? Um, of course, people are going to blow, and I think what really makes people's blood boil is the police literally stand around. In some cases, they've made arrests, but I do think actually when it comes to eco extremism, I think the police at some point have said we're going to take this off the approach to this. I do believe that. I think that the police too often blame resources and too often blame, like, oh, we have to work within the guidelines. I think they have made an ideological choice to take a hands off approach to this. Because during COVID, they were, whenever someone sat in their own gardens, which technically violated the rules or actually didn't in many cases, the police were everywhere to be seen. So, whilst I'm pro police by principle, I really think they don't help themselves sometimes. And I think they deserve public rebuke for their pathetic response to eco extremism. I think the police, if I was to sort of rate the police response to these people out of 10, I'd give them two, maybe three. Some forces are maybe better than others, but from the start they sent out the message, we're going to offer them cups of tea. Um, what if someone is trying to get a loved one to hospital? I find myself getting very angry because I think, well, I've got two parents who are getting older now. If we were in a situation, I don't drive, but if I did and I had to get to one of them to hospital, my father's had heart problems. If I had to get him to hospital somehow, and these slow marches were in front of us, God forbid, I would absolutely take matters into my own hands. Because in some cases, it isn't just people's livelihoods. In some cases, they are literally playing with people's lives, literally. So, when people question the public order bill, and when you have the likes of Greenpeace telling lies about it, and I'm disgusted by Greenpeace because they're sending out this false message that all protest is being prohibited. Um, it really makes my blood boil because they are enabling this behaviour. And I think Caroline and Lucas in the Green Party, they absolutely cannot be trusted. They support it completely. Lucas and her party will say it's peaceful protest. So the Greens of England and Wales are basically a joke. They'll never be in government, so they can afford to be sort of the voice of activists, not protesters, activists. Um, but I think it's only a matter of time before this really gets out of hand. Someone will really snap, and you can imagine a situation. Maybe they'll, in a moment's anger or frustration, they'll push one of the activists who are older. Some of them are older, and let's say they fall back and they have a heart attack or they hit their head or something and they die. Then you're having someone who is up on manslaughter charges. I really think that the law needs to consider just how much they're provoking the public. The law needs to consider the situation they're putting the public in. And if any ordinary members of the public are brought up before a judge, those judges need to be clued into public opinion. Because again, if they're not, then the anger will go against the judges. It's just this infuriating situation. I think the Home Office does want to do something about it, to be fair. Now, Suella Braverman, I'll just briefly say this. I find myself sort of in a mixed situation here because on one hand I think she's pretty corrupt. I think she's arrogant. I think she feels, the whole speeding thing, using civil servants as sort of her nursemaids, that's wrong. And I think the Tory ministers seem to think that they're above the law. So I think she should probably resign. But I do want a tough Home Secretary. I want a Home Secretary who understands public anger. And the thing about Braverman is she does. She actually does get this. So it's this kind of mixed thing where, on one hand, I dislike her sort of arrogance of power, where she thinks that she's above the law. And I know she says that she paid the fine, but she's still, thought she could do it behind closed doors. And she's already been sacked as a minister. So I think there is something in Tory ranks. That's probably for another video, but that's one part of it. The other part of it, what if she's replaced by someone who takes a far more lenient approach to eco-extremists, who doesn't have that sort of drive that she does? So if I've mixed feelings about it because I don't want to replace with someone who would be more hands off. Um, I mean, would someone like Penny Mordaunt take as hard a line? I don't know. Um, anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, but I don't really know what else can be said. I definitely think the justice system should really, really take into account mitigating factors for the public. It's a disgrace that the public are forced into this situation. If the police would show a bit of backbone and just act, just arrest them. I mean, they're saying that they have to balance the rights of peaceful protesters. Well, if legislation is brought in that makes this illegal, the slow marching under the public order bill, maybe an amendment to it, the police have to act on it. They can't say, oh, we are bound by guidelines. Well, the law is clear on that. If it is that, if it's stipulated that this is part of this sort of disruptive direct action protest that directly hurts the public, the police have no excuses. Arrest the bastards. Arrest these vile, nasty, sociopathic eco extremists. I really would like to see them face pressure for once instead of ordinary members of the public. And I think, they're not ordinary people. They're a cult. They're a dangerous cult. And I think I think the media needs to stop calling them protesters, activists. I would favour activists. I personally think that they're criminals, but activists, fair enough. Let's call them activists. Not protesters. Protesters are voicing opposition to something because they want policy change. Now, what these clowns want is a complete end to all oil production, which is impossible. Because, like I said, so far the focus has been on their tactics. Not enough is made about their actually ludicrous proposals. If you get rid of all oil based products, you end up with a situation, well, it's, when you scrape beneath the surface, when you look at what that involves, it is utterly and wholly unrealistic. Um, but I just have so much sympathy with people who are affected by them. I have sympathy with the anger. I don't blame people for losing their rag, like really, really getting angry and getting in their face. I hope it doesn't escalate. I hope it doesn't turn to outright violence for the sake of the public. Because I've no sympathy, quite honestly, with eco extremists. I think they've brought this on themselves. I think if someone really gets violent with them, I don't advocate it. I don't think it's a good idea. I hope it doesn't happen. But do I have sympathy with them? Honestly, at this point, I have no sympathy with them. I think they are vile. I think they have said, we are going to hurt the public and we don't care. And we think we are justified in doing it. Now, that's extremism. Um, and there's something very strange about their mindset because they keep social media posts. They have a Facebook page, and 99% of the feedback is negative. Like literally, once or twice they'll get supportive comments, people calling them brave. But then you look at those profiles, and that's just stop oil activists. So they have no public support. I asked them yesterday, and I don't expect a response, but I put there for the record. Just stop oil admins. Do you actually look at these comments? If you do, then what do you think you're achieving? If you don't, then what's the point of having a social media page? I mean, it makes you wonder what is their organising strategy. Do they have closed groups where they kind of organise people together? Do they have little meeting points? I'd love to see those meeting points sabotaged peacefully. I'd love to see their accounts hacked. I would love to see them really, really collapse. I'd like to see the whole organising structure break up. Um, Maybe someone who is in the know can think about that. Because I'm telling you, if they keep deciding that they're going to hurt the public, at some point the public is really, really going to fight back. And I think that this has to be understood. The police have to stop this pathetic neutral stance that they're taking. Oh, we're just maintaining the peace and it's both sides are equal. No, no. This is where the police are dead wrong, where they're sort of viewing it as a balanced situation. These extremists don't give a damn about the rights of the rest of it, so why the hell should the majority care about their rights? I mean, I'm even looking at that. What are their rights? Their rights are to have an opinion. They have no rights to break the law. They have no rights to hurt ordinary members of the public. So when people criticise the public order bill, this is why it exists. I don't know where this is all going to go. I think that they should be prescribed. I'm not naive. I know if they get prescribed, they'll just change their name. But at least it would be a message being sent out that the government's serious about this. Um, but I think another problem is their apologists. You will get people like James O'Brien on LBC and others who, Ian Dunt in the Eye, who don't necessarily, they're not going to go and join them. They're not going to be involved with them directly. But they will make excuses for them. Now, I think they should face a lot more heat and scrutiny and pushback of their ludicrous arguments because it's an utterly undemocratic argument to say that the minority have more rights than the majority. This is the tyranny of the minority, and I just have total contempt for them. And if I feel this angry, if I feel this vocal against them, I can imagine people who have to put up with them on a daily basis. It's a disgrace. It's a disgrace, and I think mitigating factors should really be put in place. If someone takes the law into their own hands, there should be strong mitigating factors that they would provoke, really. And some judge who is living in the real world, hopefully, who doesn't have their head in a bubble, needs to look at this and understand why the public is so utterly, utterly infuriated by them. Um, they're not protesters; they're activists, and I just think they're quite dangerous. I don't know where they're going to end this. I don't know. At some point, are they going to sabotage something? I think they've definitely crossed the threshold for the legal definition of terrorism. Using direct action methods, holding the public hostage, the sort of tactics they use. It may not be planting bombs and throwing Molotov cocktails and throwing punches, but they are, I would say, they're terroristic. Absolutely. Basically, holding the government to ransom, holding people to ransom to get their way. Now, to me, that's terroristic. Hell with them. I hope they fall hard on their face.